Good morning. It's May 7th, 2022, 9:06 a.m. my time, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And, I guess the subject of today's discussion is money and independence, quite frankly. In the strange oddity that you have an incredible ambition to be independent and tenacious enough to be able to somehow build your own home based on materials that you were able to go and gather yourself on land that you were able to segue by yourself and protect yourself in some manner of speaking, in which you were able to then somehow manufacture your own clothes and create your own sort of heat or shelter that enables you to survive, in addition to clothing and, of course, food and all of the other necessities of life. Chances are that you need money. And money is something that we all have to balance our time with, in terms of our earning and what we spend it on, to ultimately be able to provide a life that we're able to find fulfillment and happiness and independence of some sort, to a degree, right? Because, of course, like I said previously, unless you're able to make it all happen on yourself, none of us are truly independent. And the nature and the magnitude of the importance of money cannot be understated in that context, right? Because, I used to think that money didn't mean everything, but money really does mean everything. Now, obviously, there's different degrees of how important money is. I mean, there's many people that have found a way through life to where they are able to produce enough income to provide for their needs and their family's needs in a way that they're able to find other sources of things that are important to them, whether it's travel, whether it's entertainment, whether it's sports, whatever the case may be, art, poetry, the litany of items, for the most part, no matter what we do in this society, we have to function through the modicum of the currency of exchange, which is money, and so does the world, okay? And so the question becomes, well, then what is money? Well, money, of course, is this currency of value of exchange that can be earned by your value, labor, and intellectual capacity in construction of product that might be sold, and a variety of things that determine the amount, the volume, the velocity of money in our own lives, in which we can manage our lives appropriately. Same goes for governments, but governments operate in a completely different fashion, particularly if you're the United States. So throughout history, societies form, they function, they come together, they create this scenario in which individuals can hopefully thrive, but a lot of the times be in some capacity controlled for the benefit of those who become rulers. And throughout history, there's been societies that end up waging war against each other, to steal from one another, to plunder one another, to have any sort of advantage over another, and therein lies history. And that's why I've always been incredibly fascinated with history. And in the modern history, of course, we get into more globalism, but that was manufactured because of what we were able to obtain in World War II, because it became a major battle between the isms, right? It was fascism in Germany and communism in Russia and ultimately in China. And, we got capitalism here. I say that as opposed to democracy, because really democracy and the free market and the free choice that we can, prop up leaders that work in our best interest, that help manifest an economy that in its own right, through this balance, we've always had this sort of notion in the United States of balance of powers, right? We design our government to have three separation of branches of government, and they're supposed to act independently. And through that balance, we're supposed to, never have absolute perfection, but enough to actually make a society where there's not an extreme. There's not anarchy, and then there's not, oligarchy, monarchy, kingdom, dictatorship, that sort of thing. And democracy within that whole context, of course, is the legality of the approach, right? You have to have laws, you have to have regulation, you have to have accountability for those at the top, or that becomes a runaway train wreck, as I just exemplified by some of the big isms of the 20th century. Now, if you look around today, and I was constantly trying to figure out, well, what is 22 exactly in context to the last 20 years? Because as I've said over and over and over, it's a continuation of the last 20 years. It's smoke and mirrors. You just don't understand exactly what's going on. It's a financialized global operation that basically depends on fossil fuel. And we just extend that, and then ultimately the power gets more obscure behind, smoke and mirrors into the hands of the few. That ultimately, the way I look at it, is global kleptocracy, which is, oligarchs that steal from their countries and then run it through the global financial system, is to, now what communism under Stalin and Mao and fascism under Hitler were to the 20th century, which means devastating and going to have more devastation, or to like bin Laden at the turn of the century. And we as a society don't understand this stuff. We don't understand this stuff because our media is complicit. Donald Trump was right about one thing: fake media, and he plays it like a fiddle. Because when you're corrupt, and everybody's corrupt, it's like lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate, which is the methodology of Trump. And then you look at the other side of the fence, and is there a good guy against him? No. As I've said over and over, Obama and the Wall Street meritocracy of 4 decades of Ivy League financialization have ultimately created the new aristocracy in the deep state that basically fermented Trump. So it's the new robber barons versus the new Confederacy, and fuck them both, because the kleptocracy is in control. And ultimately what spawned me to try to tell you all this stuff today was, I was watching my good friend, this guy Paul Jay. He's a journalist and executive producer out of Canada, and he's a liberal guy, and he does really fantastic work, but he does spectacular work as it relates to 9/11. And he goes on the show yesterday and he reveals even more revelations about Saudi's involvement with 9/11, as I've been saying over and over. And I've been saying over and over in all of my social media, going back to the very beginning of social media, because in this particular instance, I think it was Biden had released more documents that show the complicity of the Saudi government. And, it's just insane. I've known about this stuff for a long time, but, it's important for you to hear this from me because of what I'm trying to, spark you to become involved with what I'm trying to create. Because ultimately, Bendar, who was this, huge power within the Saudi royal family, who had huge ties to the United States government and a lot of power in business, such as Fox, and he was a partner with Rupert Murdoch, but he was really, really close to Bush. And a lot of this new material is revealing, and it's not new, it's old material. It's like an FBI report from 6 years ago that revealed that both Cheney and Bush were very, very involved personally with making sure that our intelligence agencies did not talk to each other, that all of the agencies that are there to prevent something like terrorism from happening, like, for example, allowing Saudis into our country, weren't able to prevent Saudis from coming into our country based on a presidential edict that went, to prevent that from happening. Meanwhile, we ended up with these sleeper cells in the United States that were ultimately funded directly by Bendar's wife, and Bendar had material support of these guys training to fly planes into a building, and literally, like a very, rookie intelligence person could have looked at what was happening and some of the things that were coming out of Minneapolis, for example, where one guy called the FBI, or a woman called the FBI and said, hey, a guy wants to learn how to fly, but he doesn't want to learn how to land. Just common sense type of stuff. And you put it all together, and then you start to find out that both Bush and Cheney were involved from preventing our agencies from speaking to one another. And lo and behold, 9/11 happens, and then the rest is history, right? Saudi gains more importance. Ultimately the why of the whole thing, a lot of people speculate that they wanted to, start regime change with Saddam Hussein and maybe ultimately regime change in Iran. That would benefit the Saudis. That would benefit the United States and the whole, balance of power, payments and power with oil revenue and the way it's worked out through OPEC and, the global genesis of how oil works in markets and that sort of thing, which is the most important commodity in the world. And it has been really my entire lifetime, right? And so, you look at this big grand scheme of things, and you have to come to understand that media could have easily asked the right questions to resolve and understand that Saudi was deeply, deeply enmeshed with bin Laden and manufacturing this to happen, and Cheney and Bush were involved, and that should have blown the whole thing up, right? Maybe history would have turned out a whole lot differently. Maybe we'd be fast-tracking our way to a renewable energy paradigm and not so dependent on Saudi Arabia because they freaking attacked 9/11 and 3,000 some odd people got pulverized on that fateful day. And if you weren't one of them, maybe it doesn't matter to you as much as it would had you lost your dad or your mom or some loved one. I don't know what happens in the psychology of Americans, but for me personally, it's the most insane thing I've ever seen in my lifetime. And ultimately, it was only surpassed by insanity of what didn't happen in the aftermath of 9/11. And it was controlled, okay? All of those same scenarios took place in the 2008 financial crisis. That's what we have on display in the con. The agencies weren't allowed to have the whistleblowers kick up the information to the top dogs that were able to use the institutions of power to be able to pull the knot around the criminal syndicate. And ultimately, the criminal syndicate blew up the world. And then they ultimately smashed and grabbed all sorts of stuff, destroying millions of people, millions upon millions of people globally. And then they got bailed out by the wellspring of the Federal Reserve. We changed and did something incredibly pivotal for the rest of the world and the rest of history. We used the Federal Reserve to backstop corruption and criminality. That's what we've done for freaking 13 years. And it's fueled this global kleptocracy where Putin and, drug kings and, cartels and all of the worst part of humanity is operating with our professional class. Kleptocrats within Washington, we're talking, lobbyists and law firms and accountants and, real estate agents and a whole potpourri of people that just move and launder money because they get paid to do it. And then at the end of the day, this is all smoke and mirrors to basically prop up markets that the Federal Reserve has been propping up nonstop because they buy the freaking securities and the bonds sight unseen. They could be 100 cents on the dollar, and you wouldn't understand how this whole fraud recipe works unless you saw the goddamn con. And I need you to see the con because we got canceled. Just like 9/11 got canceled by media, we got canceled by media. And by the way, there was a great filmmaker who won an Academy Award, for Icarus, because of Putin's involvement in drug use within, the Russian Federation for their Olympic team. He wins an Academy Award. He does a film on, the Saudis' situation with Khashoggi. And it can't get on Netflix. And it got canceled, just like the con. So the whole purpose of the Fourth Estate, journalism, is to provide you context and the truth by doing the hard work and nailing this such that you understand what happens so we can create in a democracy and informed citizenry that creates accountability. But because of all the smoke and mirrors, because of all the obfuscation, because of the nonstop lies, you don't understand what's going on. To me, it's like paint by the numbers. I've seen it for so long now. I feel like Neo in the Matrix, and I can see all the different orbs and all the different globes, and it's all coming nonstop, and I know exactly who they are, but I can't fight these guys alone. I need millions of you to join me. I never wanted to become like this activist, political, personality in the context of all this stuff, but I have no choice. I spent years and years and years aggregating the truth of heroes that did all the right stuff, that put all the ingredients together to make you understand how the 2008 Great Financial Crisis was the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that our own government covered up, and it never ended because of that. There's only one way forward. We have to purge corruption. The only way you can do that is if you have the knowledge. The only place that exists is in the con. www.thecon.tv. Please go to my YouTube page. Please like and subscribe. Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs The Con. Please find me on Twitter. Please find me on LinkedIn. Please find me on Facebook. We have got to create a groundswell of millions of people that aren't cowards, that aren't ignorant. You can run around in circles, you can pretend, and you can cry, and you can go, my God, why is this world, coming down on me? What? It's because it's designed that way. And I'm trying to wake you up. That's the purpose of a citizenry within the context of a democracy. It's what the patriots had fought for from the very beginning against, quite frankly, forces of evil, tyranny, confederacy, slavery, all of that shit. It goes on and on and on throughout history. We're just in another form of it now, and you can't see it because it operates behind the scenes and through this obfuscated madness. And I just went and I pulled the threads until I shined a light on it, and it's on a freaking platinum platter for you to wrap your heads around. I hope you'll find the time to save yourself, save your country, because the world needs us, man. Onwards and upwards.